Hey, welcome to the Hell Has an Exit podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 888-699-9395 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com. Welcome to Hell Has an Exit. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. On this show, I interview anyone who has a story of redemption, victory, hope, someone who survived something terrible, usually active addiction. And today I have the legend, Keith Fehrman, the god of vape juice, sneakers, memorabilia, definitely in the hobby. And he's got an amazing story. I've actually known Keith since I got clean. And since he's got clean, and I could verify that when he came in with a trash bag, he literally came in with like an actual trash bag over his shoulder. So Keith, if you want to just tell your story, where you're from, how it all started.
Hi, my name is Keith. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, up there, a real small state. I think it's like 60 miles long, 30 miles wide. Grew up to a mom that did suffer from the disease of addiction. I remember being given away to my grandmother at 3 weeks old. And, my mom, I don't remember. Let me say my grandmother, told me about it. My mom being at the door and screaming like, I can't do it. I can't take it. Here he is. I believe my mom had me at an early age, and she was like 18 when she had me. So I grew up around a household. She had me. I don't know who my dad is. She had me. I'm not sure. She was using at the time by any way.
Never met your dad? No,
by any ways or means to get more. And I think she, on one of her hustles, got pregnant with me, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Where I grew up, my grandmother was the only one in the family trying to she was the glue of the household, so she would hold it together for us. My mom would be in and out of prison. I remember visiting numerous times from like being a small boy at like 6, 7 years old, all the way up to like in my 20s, I believe it was her last prison sentence she did a federal and then she did finally a state in the state of Florida. So all through my life, it was just visiting her in prison and, going in, bringing her drugs. They'd have parent-kid day in the prison, and her friends would suit me up in my tighty whities with the little pocket in the front that you have. And I'd put it in there and I'd bring it into her. And then
what do you think it was? Heroin?
No, maybe sometimes more like she was getting weed and pills through there. Mm-hmm. But then I figured out I knew I had it in there, but I never touched it because I was afraid of her. But then once I figured out that she couldn't get at me because she couldn't really get that pissed in prison, it never really made it there. So when her friends would give it to me, by the time it got to the prison, it wouldn't be there. And she'd come in and she'd hug me and, oh, how you doing, baby? And she'd whisper, pass it off. And
holy shit.
And, there was nothing to pass off. I'd be like, oh shit, I must have lost it. And she'd be like, all right, God, he's ready to go home now.
Wow.
Yeah. So
how old were you?
It started started about like 12. So, but I mean, it was before that. At 3.
But mainly your grandma was raising you?
Yeah, my grandmother would raise me, and then my mom would come around. My grandmother, of course, tried to get it, so we had our own relationship, my mother and I. She would give me to my mom. My mom, she grew up, she was a butch gay lady. So she'd have girlfriends over the house, and then they'd get in fights. Christmas trees would be shot out the front door at people. She'd get aggravated with me, and I was a real quiet kid. I don't know what I was into. At 3, she'd like roll me a joint and sit me in front of the beanbag and put on Bugs Bunny and light it for me and let me smoke it at 3.
Wow. You're smoking weed at 3?
Yeah, at 3.
I thought I was crazy.
And then, it just progressed from there. She'd tell me stuff like, Santa comes to this fucking house, he'll be arrested for breaking and entering. So yeah, it was kind of crazy.
Oh my God.
At the time, I laugh about it now, but the horror, I guess, of
I mean, you have kids now, and I'm sure it like totally 180s now.
Exactly. I mean, I could never think of telling my 7-year-old like Santa is going to get arrested for B&E if he came to this house. Yeah, but you know what? We all suffer for our own demons, and sometimes it's just how it is. I grew from that. I remember like riding around on a tricycle around and around the table, and she was nodding out at the table, and it was a small little kitchen table, circle like style, sat four, and I'd have my cat like on the handlebars with me, flying around, and she was like, "Kitty, stop, Kitty, stop," and like at the third time, she just stuck out her hand and grabbed the tricycle and threw it at the wall, and literally outside the house, because back then tricycles and toys were made a lot different. They were a lot
metal, right?
Metal,
Yeah.
and the wheel was sticking out on the outside of the house. So stuff like that. I remember her getting in fights with other girls, and there were other girls that were like crazy. Like this lady Rochelle I knew, she literally shaved all her body hair off, was psycho, would be in the club with my mother in the gay bars and say I'm bored and pull out a switchblade and walk onto the dance floor and just start stabbing people in the side, like walking by them.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and she got in a fight with my mom one time, and she called my grandmother and said, I can't find your daughter. And she was known to Molotov houses, so she would literally like known for this, light it up, throw it in the window, set the whole place on fire. And she says, she called my grandmother, and I was like 6. I remember it very vividly. She said to her, I can't find your daughter, so I'm coming to kill you and your grandson. So my grandmother in like October buried me under a little Volkswagen Beetle in leaves and said, no matter what happens to Graham, don't ever come out of here until the cops get here.
Wow.
And then the cars pulled in, and a bunch of girls were in the cars. I remember peeking out from under this car, and it ended up being my mom's friends, and she never came. And then I also remember the guy that thought he was my dad. He was really crazy. He was like a collector, so to speak, in New England.
Yeah.
And he showed up one night with her and told my grandmother to come downstairs and pop the trunk, and there she was. And he was like, I'm taking care of her now for threatening you and Keithy. And my grandmother was like, no, what are you, out of your fucking mind? Like, let her go, let her go. So yeah, I grew up in a lot of turmoil.
Yeah, no shit.
By 12, I was freebasing. I was hanging out with like 18-year-olds. So we were going into...
What was school like? You going to school at all?
Yeah, I was going. What's crazy is that I was like a straight A student. I was like really good at school.
Really smart.
Yeah, really good at school. Like I would go.
Are you well behaved?
Yes.
Pretty well behaved?
Yeah, pretty well behaved, yeah.
But then when you come home, you'd be smoking crack?
Yeah.
Free base?
Well, I mean, yeah, only on weekends. No, yeah, it wasn't something, you know what? We weren't like back. It's weird. I didn't have it where I was like selling shit for it and going crazy for it then. It was actually literally like Friday or Saturday, we get my buddy's little car. He was like 18, I'm 12, 13, 14. I continued to do it. And then we drive up into the hood. They'd stick, back then they had like little vial, it was totally different. It was more freebase than crack. It was like switching. And I'd slap their hand and we'd go all over the car and we'd pull away, one of those things. And then the rest of the week I'd be fine, and I was into dancing. I loved to dance, huge break dancer. So I would go and then just go to normal and just go through. It was crazy. But then the drugs continue to just progress and progress.
So like you're smoking weed at 3. Are you like enjoying? Like when do you start enjoying weed?
I never really enjoyed it. Again, when she gave it to me at 3, it wasn't something like, I was like, yo, Mug. But, she would just do it. I'd think it was cute to show her friends, so she'd give it to me.
Yeah.
At 12, I was doing that too. But, I mean, it just made me, like, paranoid. I'm one of those people that do it to get... I mean, not that, like, the freebase wasn't making me paranoid.
It's different.
It was a different kind, yeah. I wasn't really into it. I wasn't... but I seen the destruction of it go through a neighborhood. Our neighborhood was, like, a tight-knit Irish-Italian neighborhood. And then it just came through, and AIDS had started back then, and back then we didn't really know, like, hey, you can't get it through contact, or you can't get it through this, or there was none of that. So I remember as a little boy, like, going to funerals for people that died from AIDS, and they'd have like a veil over the coffin because they didn't want no one to get near them.
Jesus.
Yeah, I remember my grandmother was a private nurse. So, and back then, there were people in their 30s and 40s that were dying from AIDS, and no one would go to the house to take care of them because they didn't want to catch it. They had no idea. And here's my grandmother going in and taking care of these people. I'm like, they need to be taken care of too. So it was, and then to watch it just destroy my neighborhood. And, either people were going to prisons. There was a lot of people robbing banks. There was a lot of people dying. But it isn't like today. Back then, it was totally different. Like, hey, if someone got really like almost to the point of ODing, it was more of like, hey, where'd you get that stuff? It's just totally different with the carfentanil. It's totally nuts. But life was, I had this bright idea. I always had this business mindset. And at like 16, I figured, I was like, yo, you know what I'm going to do? Because my mom was constantly like, I'd open the gifts on Christmas and my birthday, and by noon they'd be gone. Or, and it was just where she was. And, before she passed, I forgave her for everything. And we squashed that stuff. But I figured, like, instead of my grandmother going through this, I figured out the math. I was like, well, if I buy this much of it, bricks, they were called back then, and I could sell it, and then I could sell it to her, and she doesn't have to go out and do all this crazy shit. But again, I'm a businessman. So even back then at 7, I had my first little candy store in the middle of all this turmoil for the kids in the neighborhood that were getting high on the Caniminol and the Tussionics and stuff that's like not even around today. And they like to eat. So they would come by and
buy candy for you.
And I put them on the arm, and like they'd have credit for the week, and like and I did this with sodas and ice creams, and I was doing it at 7 years old. My big idea at 16 was I was gonna be the guy that like sold. I could sell it to her, and it would be fine, and I'd be able to make some extra money in the neighborhood because everyone was starting to buy it, and that worked like for the first couple of months, and then I decided, I'm gonna do it just on the weekend. I'll do some dope, and then I'm going to do it on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday football, and then, Monday, and then Tuesday, you know how it goes. And before I knew it, I remember literally like waking up one day sick. I didn't know why, and my buddy says to me, you got a habit. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. What do you mean I got a habit? I was like 18. And I said, what do you mean?
Were you shooting dope at that time?
No.
Or snorting it?
Snorting it. And I was one of those that I think I was like allergic to it. So I had like this big crusty nose, like between my lip and then my nostrils. He says, yeah, man. He goes, you got a habit. And I remember that day I was doing like 6-7 bags a day, and I only had enough for 2. And he goes, the only way you're going to feel that, and he was shooting it, and he goes, as if you shoot it. And I was like, oh, shit. I was like, all right, well, show me how. And I did it that one time, and that was it. At 18, I had a friend that had lived there, him and his brother, and they had moved to North Carolina when I was like 16. I might be off on the time. So at 18, I hadn't seen them, but I heard one of them had killed himself. In the midst of a habit, I went down at 18 years old to North Carolina, and I stayed with the brother, and I was just complete abstinence down there. I started to train, started to kickbox. I was traveling that state kickboxing. I was taking all my aggression on and everybody else. My mom had gotten locked up again in Rhode Island. And then she was out. To back it up, I grew up with this one kid, Robert. And Robert was like my brother. He lived probably like 5 houses down from me with his dad. His mom wasn't there ever. She was like in Oklahoma. His dad was a old Vietnam vet drunk. He would wake us up at like 4 a.m. and tell us, boys, get the fuck up, time to march. And he'd put us in the snow outside in our underwear to march.
Wow.
So he would be abused. And I remember like I'd wake up all the time and Rob would be in my bed, like going to sleep. And I'd say, again? He'd be like, yeah, he hit me. And my grandmother, that was her like second grandchild. And my mom was real close to him. He was like, and I was always a small little kid. I was tiny. And he was the bigger kid, so I would do all our homework, but because I was the brain, and he would fight everybody for us. So it worked out. We had a great relationship. So when I moved away, he didn't know he wasn't doing drugs, he wasn't doing anything like that. But when I moved away from New England and came down to North Carolina, my grandmother was coming down to see her sister in Florida, in Hollywood, Florida. And she said to me, well, she has one in Hollywood, Florida, in Lake City. And when she got to the house and I was doing great, I was really happy, fighting, training, working out, working at a pizza place, tossing pizzas in the window. She had said to me, something happened. Rob fell off a ladder at work, and it was all grass, and he hit the cement, and his brain swelled on the way to surgery, and he died. And he had a baby on the way. I had just seen him before I left.
How old were you at this time?
I was like 19, 20. To back it up, though, I did have, a saving grace in my youth. So the nurse at the school, when I was about 5, 6 years old, realized that I didn't have a dad and put me into a program called the Big Brothers of America. And I ended up meeting this guy, a college kid from Providence College, and he comes by and he's going to my house and he's picking me up, and we're going out to these Big Brother events, and we're both looking at each other like, oh God, these suck. And I was like, yo, can we go to your college like instead? Because I'm all down like, yo, I know he's having parties there, and I'm 6 or 7. I'm like, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna see all these guys having fun, hang out.
You were 6 or 7?
Yeah, when I met him, and I just wanted to go there and hang out with everybody, and he took me, and I was like, so I was going and like with his
like college cake parties.
Yeah, but I wasn't drinking or nothing. It was just like hanging out and watching all these girls act fools.
You're like the mascot.
Yeah, it was great. Exactly, like the mascot. So he brings me to his family, his mom and dad, and he had a sister, and they're both in college. And he brings me to his family, and they welcomed me with open arms. Here I am, little blonde-haired, blue-eyed little boy, 6 years old, don't have anything from Providence. They're from a nicer part of town. And they take me in, and the next thing you know is like in the summers, I'm living on Cape Cod. I have a little Boston whaler. I'm driving around. I'm a member of the yacht club. They're paying for private schools for me to go to. Incredible. Like, straight out like insane. It was, and I loved them. She was like my second mom and second dad, and he taught me how to swim, the father, and he became like a brother though in college. And then they came and said to me after like a year, I guess after you're done with college, that program ends and you don't have to do it anymore. And they came and said he came to my grandmother and said, look, they're gonna give him a new big brother, but let's leave the program and just continue this on our own. I'll cover it, but that goes on until today still.
You're still close to them?
Yeah, my kids, that's their grandma and papa. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was just on the phone with her like a half hour ago.
That's cool.
She was talking about, we sent flowers for Mother's Day up there.
That's cool.
They were in their 80s. Incredible. And through the disease, I was told by the dad, like, never call us again. You're never going to do nothing in life. You're torturing us. And I can see that now. Like, I would call her and say, hey, I don't have any food. I need money, and she'd send it overnight, cash in the magazine. So I mean,
fuck yeah.
Yeah, and how much would I spend on food? Not a lot, But yeah. And through recovery, I've learned to be different. But I get down here anyway, Florida. First town I get.
So why'd you move to Florida? Because your mom was here?
No, my mom was still up there and locked up. So I come down here because my grandmother shows up in North Carolina and tells me my brother, best friend, died. I'm there with one of my friends whose brother just killed himself. She says to me, listen, I'm going down to Florida. You should come with me. So, and my grandmother never drove, so she got there on a Greyhound. So I said, yeah, sure, fuck it, Florida. Because in New England, we think I'm sure you've heard me say this before when I speak, we think of Florida of like palm trees, pink flamingos, all this shit. And I've never seen a fucking pink flamingo. But we get down here, and all of a sudden the bus starts going west. So I'm in Jacksonville. I'm looking at all these nice buildings and trees, palm trees. And then the bus goes west, and I'm in Lake City, Florida. And Lake City, Florida is like out of control. They had like literally KKK in the middle of the streets, protesting and all this shit. And I even started seeing a girl there was a manager of the movie theater I was working at. And her family, I remember I went over to the house to meet her, and they brought her in the other room, and I could hear it clearly as day, said, he's a goddamn Yankee. And, it's either us or him.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, holy shit.
Where the fuck am I?
Yeah, where the fuck am I? And I was still abstinent there. I was about 21 there when I got there. And then my grandmother was like, yo, because I was hanging with my buddy, this black kid, and she was like, yo, they're going to stop fucking burning crosses on our lawns if we stay here. Like, fucking around. So we got the fuck out quick. We lived in a little trailer. It was so bad, that place. I mean, we had nothing. You know, I grew up with absolutely nothing. And I was working at the movie theater. I learned a good trade. I became a projectionist. I was building the movies and doing stuff like that.
That's cool.
Yeah, so we come down to Hollywood. Still abstinent. Still haven't done anything. Not drinking, not smoking for a while. And we moved in with her sister. And my mom... Let's see. At first, we had to go back up to get her and the animals because we had 2 cats. So my grandmother and I drove up north in a Celica. I was dating the girl from the movie theater still. She moved to Hollywood with me. We were both working at the movie theater. It used to be on Sheridan Street. And we're both there. She's like managing. I'm a projectionist. And then she went to work for SunTrust. She never did drugs in her life. She let me use the Celica. I drove from here to New England to get my mom. She was out of prison, but she was in like a rehab treatment center to get her ready for the streets. And when we got there, I remember you couldn't, I think it was called Benjamin Rush. You couldn't like, it's not there anymore. You couldn't see them and go in and visit, but you could look up at them in the window. And she's like talking to me through the window. My grandmother and I just drove in this fucking 2-door Celica all the way there. And she's next to a girl in the window and she's like, I'm not going. And we're like, why? And she points to the girl. She's like, I met her and I love her.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and we're going to stay together. And I'm like, fuck, let's get out of here.
Wow.
Yeah, so we grabbed our cats and, you know, my cat ended up dying at like 24 years old that I had. And we took him back to Hollywood, Florida. And my grandmother, we lived off her first husband died in the war, so she got a check from him. And my grandfather was never around. He was an alcoholic. She got his check too. He had died when I was younger. I told her, I said, you know, because she was giving one of those checks to my mother. And I was like, fuck her. You know, like, let's take them both. Why are we living like how bad we are when we could have, even with both checks, it was a little bit better, trust me. I think with both checks, it might have been like $1,200 a month. So we were living off one of like 7. So she took it. Then my mother came. My mother called her one day. I was like, where's my check? She like, she says, no, that's my check, Johnny. And she's like, what do you mean it's your check? It's my fucking check. Then she showed up. She just showed up in Hollywood, Florida. And she said she'd go to, you know, get clean and do everything. And so I remember we didn't have like cell phones or anything. I remember she was at the house and I dropped her off at this state-run place down here that we all know that's in Brow Boulevard. And when we get there, I drop her. And then
Crazy that place has been around that long. It's wild.
It's crazy. And I get home and thought I was smarter than my mom. I unplugged all the phones in the house because I knew that's going to last about 6 hours before she's going to call us. And of course she tried, but no one was answering. So my neighbor that I hardly ever didn't even know comes pounding on my door and is like, hey, your mom's on the phone at my house. And I'm like, how'd she get your number? She's like, well, she got it yesterday. So my mother knew what was going down. And she's like, and she says to give you this message. If that little motherfucker doesn't come and pick me up right now, I'm going to light myself on fire on his front lawn.
Oh my God.
So this neighbor was freaking the fuck out. And I'm like, oh, I apologize for that. So I go and get her. She's like, all right, Kitty, here's your geographical lesson. Find me a Martin Luther King Boulevard, Ave Street, Road. She's like, and that's where all the drugs are. I was like, all right. So we ended up finding 2, one here and one down south. From there, my friend Jared had come down.
Are you using with your mom at this point?
Yeah, we're doing armed robberies. We're robbing places at gunpoint in stores. We're robbing drug dealers. We're going crazy. We're boosting all over, stealing, for those that don't know, from stores, getting in chases. My mom, my whole life also was a getaway driver, so she could drive like literally in reverse and drift, and she was like out of control.
Wow.
Mechanic.
Wow.
She was,
like a butch lesbian, drug addict.
Johnny. Wow. She was a bouncer in nightclubs. When I was a little boy.
She was a bouncer?
Yeah. And anyone that grew up with me, like, tells my wife, and because people are like, yeah, right. Like, I would be like, because I was so small, I'd be like, I'm getting my mom to beat your dad's ass. And she would literally knock him the fuck out.
Oh
yeah.
God.
Like my boy called me one day. He's like, yo, I just seen your mom beat up 2 dudes with nunchucks. I didn't even know she could fucking spin nunchucks. Another time someone was fighting with her buddy this girl, and they drove up and threw a half stick of dynamite in the car.
Get the
and my
fuck
mom
outta
was
here.
talking to her outside the car, and my mom reached in, grabbed it, and threw it. And my mom was a big girl. She was like 350.
Wow.
And it blew her onto the sidewalk.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she was out of fucking control. There was like no one in the neighborhood fucked with my mom. There was a heavyweight
God.
champ kickboxer that was known up there, Bobby. And he was like, because he was close to my grandmother. My grandmother, to survive for us, used to sell pills, Vicodin and Percocet, in the donut shop in our neighborhood to pay for me and her and my mom in prison for lawyers and stuff. And, you know, he loved my grandmother and he was close to my grandmother. And he was like, come on. He told my mother one day, because they were like love-hate relationship. Come on, Johnny, like fucking punch me, you dyke, and like see what you got. And she punched him in the arm and he was like, it sucked. And when she left, he turned around and told my grandmother, holy shit. Like, yeah, she's no one to fuck with. Wow. Yeah, she was, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was crazy, man. It was crazy. All the time, kids I'd be fighting, they were like, yeah, your mother's a dyke. I'd be like, I know. Like, yeah.
She'll beat the fuck out of you.
Yeah. For that, your dad's going to, I remember one time I get off, this is great. I get off a school bus and I see this white kid poor little like heavy set white kid, never bothered anyone. I see like 4 black kids jumping him. And I'm like, hey, leave the kid. With that, they all ran to me and jumped me. And he took off. And I must have caught a beating for like 20 minutes, because I remember walking home and here's this white kid that was getting jumped that I stuck up for at my door with his mother, knocking at it. And my mom is in a 3-piece suit in the house with a tie and everything on, opens it. The lady said to her, do you have a little black boy named Keith? And she's like, no. And here I come up the street, fucked up. And they said to her, what happened, Keithy? I says, I just got jumped. And she goes, oh, you did? And we lived a street over from the projects. And my mother walked into the projects with me and said, oh, at the top of her lungs, all right, motherfuckers, you want to jump my kid? All come outside now. It's time to get all your asses beat. And I promised no one came out of the house. And then they called the cops. When the hell did they call the cops? And Officer Taft, he was a cool cop. He shows up and he's like, she said, you think he's going to stop me, you motherfuckers? And the cop was like, she's right. She's right. Like, yeah, I don't want to fuck with her.
Wow.
Out of control. Yeah, it was nuts. That's why I guess people like, hey, if I wrote just stories about my mom, it would just be hours and hours of it. So I get down here. I'm doing the right thing. I'm abstinent. And then she brought me to the Martin Luther Kings, and I go with her. And I pick up right where I left off. And my friend Jared's down here. One time, I remember, there's another one with my mom. I remember in New England, right before I had left to come down to North Carolina, I had shot up maybe once or twice. And this guy there was at my house. My mom's, okay, so he gets me high. He says, well, you need your own needle. So I went in. My mom, I knew, had him in the bathroom, so I took one of hers and boom, did it. And he handed it to me. He says, go clean it out. I didn't know what the fuck he meant. I didn't know I had to flush the thing. So I just put it back. Wow. And he's sleeping, nodding out on my floor. And my mom's ritual every day when she got home, because of course she was out hustling all day and copping, was to go into the bathroom
and flush the needles.
To go in the bathroom and with the newspaper, pretend she was on the toilet shitting and reading the paper, and she'd get high in there with her little setup, and she'd pull out her stuff. And of course, through the door, I hear her doing that, and I also hear her go, "What the fuck? There's blood in here." Oh, because I didn't flush it. I was using it, and she's like, "Kate, at the top of her lungs." And she knew I was snorting, but she didn't know until this day. And I get in there and she's like, "Let me see your arms." And I show my left arm, and I had done it in my right. And she's like, "Let me see the other one." So I show my left arm again, same arm. She's like, "The last time I checked, the last time I gave birth to you, you had 2 fucking arms." So she's like, "Let me see the other one." And she's seen it, and she's like, "Oh, you did it with him, huh?" And he was like nodding out on my floor. And she literally went in the room, stepped over him, so one of her feet were on both sides of him. And she tapped him, was like, "Hey, John, wake." And when he woke up, she knocked him out again. And she's like, "That's for getting high. That's for shooting up with my son."
Wow.
Yeah. And then, and I never did it again until we were in Florida together. And I remember once I was doing it with my friend behind the door, Jared. And Jared's actually, he's been clean now almost 5 years or 5 years, and he's coming down again. He's one of my best friends, very tight. And he came down, he got me off, and she caught it. And she like chased him into the bathroom, and he jumped in. He knows her very well. He jumped in the shower. He wanted nothing to do with her, screaming, trying to get away from her. Yeah. So, and then it just was rip roaring, using, doing stick ups, stealing everything we could that wasn't bolted down, going off. It was crazy, and it continued for a long time. We were on the methadone clinic together and all this other stuff.
Yeah, because I've seen your arrest mugshots.
Yeah.
You must have been. How many times do you think you've been arrested?
I know I got 23 felonies. So
wow, you have 23 felonies.
Felonies, yeah. So yeah, some maybe didn't. So a little bit more. I've been arrested. A lot.
Yeah. It makes you become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, sure. Well, you have no choice because then they're like, you can't get a job. So so that's the only choice you got is to become an entrepreneur.
So how many active years of using? Probably like 15 years of hardcore using from that point on?
20 something.
Yeah,
20 something years of hardcore using. Mm-hmm. Hardcore, like rough. Go to bed with a lot of stuff for the next morning. My quotations around that. Save it for the next day so you're not sick. Wake up at midnight or come out of the knot at midnight and say, well, it's the next day, and do it. And then for the last few years, I was like doing 5 Xanax in the morning, half a gram of dope, driving to the clinic, drinking 150 milligrams of methadone, smoking my body weight in crack all day. Afterwards, doing another 5 bars and another gram to go to bed. Mm-hmm. And it just continued on and on and on. And the only time...
Would you ever get clean in between those years? Would you ever want to get clean?
Yeah, there was a time where my ex was pregnant, and we were using while she was pregnant. And she was about 9 months pregnant, 8 months pregnant. And we had warrants. We had warrants in Palm Beach. We had warrants in Dade County. We had warrants in Broward. And I had called to make sure, like, hey, what happens if a pregnant girl goes in there? Because, you don't want nothing to happen. Sick fucking twisted thinking when you say it out loud. Like, you don't want nothing to happen to baby, but then we're using.
Yeah.
They said, oh, no, there'll be a detox and there'll be all this stuff. So we had gone in. She had gotten arrested first. And then like a week later, I did. I didn't know what was going on with her. And once I was going to get sentenced, I was with someone we knew from the streets, and on the way up to the judge, they were like, hey, sorry about the baby. And I was like, what happened? They were like, I'm next door to her in the cell, and she lost the kid. And I'm like, damn, and like 15 minutes later, I got sentenced to a 364 in the county. And I go back, and then...
God, that sucks. That just sounds like the worst day of life.
Yeah. 15 minutes, I find out that she lost the baby, and I get 364. So I go back to the cell, depressed. But, I mean, I brought it on myself. People are like, well, you didn't make her. Yeah, but I didn't say anything about it either. I co-signed the fuck out of it. So we go back, and I go back to the cell. And then 6 months into my sentence, they're like, they bring me back to court. And that's always an add-on charge, and I'm like, fuck, would they catch now? I thought I was getting out soon. And they give me a 6 month. I get there, and they're like, hey, we're for the interest of, such and such. Her birth name was Teresa. And I was like, what are you talking about? Why am I here? And they said, well, this is your daughter. She's 6 months old. I was like, I was told that she passed. She didn't make it because she was born addicted. They said, well, whoever told you that was a liar. And they said, do you want to try to get her? And I was like, absolutely. So they said, okay, we need you to do this year case plan. We're going to have you do drug testing, parenting classes, supervised visitations. There was somebody, that was watching her, and she was in their care, and they said, we'll give you a chance to get her back. So I remember, besides, all the times I was locked up, I never used in there, except a couple. I remember I did 6 more months, happy. I got back that day, like, holy shit. I had a kid. I had like one picture that they had given me right there. I had this kid sketch it out, and like I had it above my bunk, and I got out, and immediately the next day I started doing these parenting classes and started doing all this shit that they wanted. I lived in Hollywood and had $0 and would have to take like buses to get to Oakland Park in University to see her and do classes there too. And 6 months out, so that time period of did I have time where I wasn't using was about then. was about then that I wasn't doing anything.
Then eventually, like what leads, like people always ask me like, oh, so what was it that got you clean, And I think it's different for everybody. What about like the rooms? Like, were you going to meetings at all? Did you think meetings worked? Did you know anyone that got clean?
It's crazy. The fellowship that I decided to go to where I met you is when I was a little boy. I remember one time going to that fellowship meeting with my mother, and they were doing like a raffle for the book. I'm not going to say what book. Yeah. It's not the book the others are thinking with the B, that's for sure. But no, I'm joking. But it was, and I won the raffle. And like, I never really thought of what that was. But 6 months out, they said, well, we're ready to go to court next month. And I'm like, for what? A status? And they're like, no, custody. I didn't have my shit together. So I didn't know what the hell was going to happen. I said, well, how are we going to do that? I've only been out 6 months. You gave me a year case plan. They said, but we gave it to you a year ago. And they took everything that day. They stripped my rights. I don't even know if I went to court today. I have them do it. I just said, fuck it. I'm not sure. I don't remember. That's when I just continued to start using again. And then through that, I've accumulated all these arrests and all this crazy shit and getting caught and living on the streets and living in abandonmeniums and living under the bridges with a little kitten and just fucking chaos.
I do remember this. Yeah. I remember the cat in your story.
Yeah, fucking chaos. And you remember also me trying to, when they pull us over, I had warrants, so I'd act mentally retarded. And you do remember that. Yeah, and like I did it 3 times. And
Wait, let's go back. So when you would get pulled over, you would pretend to be mentally retarded? So
what would happen is I would never drive. So I knew I had warrants, so I would never drive. And first time, like, my ex is driving the car, and I'm like, hey, so... you know what happens? Like, if we get pulled over, I'm going to just go into retard mode. And she's like, what? And so she's like, what the fuck do you mean? I was like, just go with it. Like, and she got pulled over. We're on Alligator Alley. I'm listening to her. We were in a rental with like stolen stuff all in the trunk from stores, video games and stuff. And they're like, talking to her, and they were like, let it go. And they were like, yeah, it's your tints. And she's like, it's a rental. They're like, okay. And then I heard it. Does he have a license? And I'm like, oh, fuck, here they come. So when they got there, I had one hand that I like twisted, made it look like it had a stroke or something in it. And I squinched one of my side of my eyes. And when they opened it up, I was rocking back and forth. And I was like,
drooling on you? Would you
yeah, not really. I was like, hello, officer. Like, and
oh my God.
Yeah. And then they got me out of the car. And I dragged one of my feet, like I pretend like the left side of my body just didn't work anymore. And I dragged myself to the back, and I was like, officer friendly, officer friendly. And then he asked me for ID, and I started crying. I was like, I don't have ID, and I can't get ID. I have a student ID. And they were like, what the fuck is going on here? So then they had popped the trunk, and they seen all this stolen shit. And I was like, oh my God, video games. I love Super Mario Brothers.
No.
Yeah. And the cop was like, bro, and telling his partner, like, that pulled up. Well, another cop, he's like, let them go, dude. He's like, what the fuck are you going to do with these people? Then I started saying, officer, I feel like I'm going to have a seizure. And he's like, oh, shit. He's like, here, sit back in I was like, it's hot. And he sat back in the car. He put me in the car. And he's like, turn on the AC. And I cried again. And he's like, what's wrong? I said, I don't know how. And, so he's reaching over me, putting on the AC. And they let me go. And then...
that was really good.
Yeah. And then...
how many times have you done that?
3 for 3. And... yeah, one time they even found... Yeah, one time they found pictures of me, like, posing, like, prison photos, like, fucking... And they were looked at her, and they were like, is something wrong with him? And she's like, oh, no, they said, was he in an accident? And she's like, yeah, he's in an accident, right? And another time...
oh, my God.
Another time we're driving around in the hood. We're driving around the hood, and they're like, hey, I'm asking the guy, we keep going by in a circle, and I'm like, yo, I need a 40. What are you, fucking deaf? And after like the 4th time, he's like, you fucking idiot, the cops are behind you. And woo, we got pulled over. Instant retard mode. Yeah, instant retard mode. I started rocking back and forth. So they grab her. I have syringes, stems all over the floor in front of me. So they start yelling at her, like, how dare you get this kid hot, you piece of shit. And Yeah, so I was like, and I'm like, she's a pretty girl. She's a pretty girl. And yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So they pop, and I hear them talking. There's like 8 of them now. And they're like, what the fuck do we do? They're like, well, we definitely got her dead to rights. They're like, but if, I remember the words, they were like, but if we, this is Daytona. They were like, if we arrest her, we're stuck with the retard because he can't get home.
Wow.
And they were like, just let him go. And they took all our shit. And I remember I had like, whenever I was out boosting, I always like to boost shit that I like too. So like I'd boost the food I was going to eat that night.
Yeah.
All my comic books. And they took all my comic books. And I just went into spaz mode. I want my Spider-Man, and fucking slapping the car.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And they were like, get him the fuck out of here. But they took all these video games. I'm sure they all kept. And then the last time I did was on State Road 84 at the 7-Eleven. We had gotten dropped off by someone, and the guy knew like we had warrants. So immediately he called the cops because he was pissed at us. Well, we go outside and we're sitting on the curb right in front of 7-Eleven, and the cop car pulls right up, like almost hits us in the fucking knees. And he gets out and he's like, what's your names? And she says something real quick, and he's like, you're Catherine Daniels. And I just went into instant retard mode again. And I was like, they said, what's your name? I said, Benjamin Conway. And they were like, so I knew, they said, you're such and such. They knew her real name, and she had given an alias. So I knew they knew my name. So right away I threw out the old, Keith isn't going to come here with all the cops here. You know, like so
there's someone else there.
Yeah. So they thought like Keith wasn't there. I had mentioned Keith, and I'm Keith. And I remember she had like I had like $200 and I had just given her $100, and they were arresting her. They were like, she has a warrant. So they called me a cab, and she's sitting in the cop car, and I'm like, can you ask if I can get her $100? And she's looking at me like she wanted to fucking kill me. She's like, fuck you. Yeah, she didn't give me the $100. So I got in the cab, and I'm rocking back and forth in the cab with my paralyzed left side of my body. And cabbie's looking at me like, what the fuck? And the cop's like, dude, I don't know. And he's like, where's he live? And I'm like, I live in Broward. And like, we're in Broward. And fucking the cab's like, and the cop's like, just get him the fuck out of here. So when the cab pulled away, I remember like going, whew, and just relaxing. And the cab was like calling in dispatch to say, I have an issue. And then I tapped him on the shoulder, and I was like, yo, bro, I'm not handicapped. Don't worry about it. I'm like, let's go to Opelika.
Yeah, immediately.
Immediately. So fucking crazy thing.
Wild.
So yeah, I did stay.
I've never heard that in my life.
Yeah, I reenact it when I would speak a lot. And people were like, yo, you're the kid with the retard story. You know, it was just continuously just using. And my mom got locked up. My grandmother was down here. My grandmother was my life. She passed away. She passed away from cancer. I was using through that. I remember like I couldn't even get to the hospital. I didn't want to see her, you know, in the hospital, in hospice. And then I went up there, and they left us there, and I sat there at her bed crying, and she came out of it, which was shocking. She was like, it's going to be all right, Keith, we'll be fine. And, you know, I'll get better. You know, she was to the end, like just trying to fight for me. And that day I went back. I was staying at the house her and I had. We had like a little 1-bedroom apartment in Hollywood, and it just spiraled out of control. I got kicked out of there. The landlord came over and took the fucking front door off the place because I had no money to pay after a couple of months. And then I left there, hustled up, got a little apartment down in the area near my store, where my store is now. And my mom was gone. My mom got arrested by the feds. She was cashing. My grandmother was still getting the check from the government, and she cashed it, and she got caught. From there, I lost contact with my mother. I didn't know where she was. I was asked to leave the property where I was staying because I wasn't paying there. My ex was nowhere to be found. I had lost the rights to my daughter, didn't see her anymore. I was just out of control. And my ex actually was in prison too. She went to prison. So I ended up moving into the condominiums in Hollywood, and, you know, wherever the hell I could stay. Had this little gray kitten, kept him with me. And then I was living under the bridge on Sheridan Street fucking nuts, smoking crack. The manatees would come up. I'd blow it in their. Yeah, I was out of control. Like in fucking. No wonder they hung around. They were there for like fucking days. I was like, damn, they must really like me. They were looking for more.
Yeah.
And hanging and doing anything and ways and means to get more. It was out of control. And I had accumulated, locked up so much. I was waiting on a charge in Broward. I go ahead and I get one up in, while I'm out on bond in Broward, I catch a charge in Dade. And this time my ex had gotten out. Well, this is maybe right before she went in. It was before she went in, yeah. And I catch a charge. Yeah, this is right before that's right, before I became homeless. We catch another charge. Had one in Broward, we catch one in Dade, always co-defendants. And well, I'm looking at her in the box in Dade, and the public pretender, whatever he is, defender, pretender, same shit. He says, yo, I'm gonna get you probation. And I'm like, all right. I'm like, yo, can you do something for me with the probation? He's like, what? I was like, can you make sure that she, if I contact her, I get locked up, it violates it. And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and I was like, look, I'm not better than you. You're not better than me. We're just not good for each other. And I had gotten the message of hope in there. I had an old roommate. Before that, I met a guy named Kevin. And Kevin was in there with me, and he said, yo, hey, there's a fellowship called such and such. And, because I'm kicking methadone and dope and all this stuff, and I'm hating it. I'm locked up in Dade County, which that should get anybody clean that gets locked up there. I was like, oh, get the fuck away from me, dude. Like, I don't want to hear you. And I was like, you're in here too. He's like, I just missed a court case. He's like, but, I've been.
I'm clean.
Yeah. He's like, I've been clean for like a year now. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, dude. The fuck out of here. And then that day, I remember they moved me to a cell with this guy. He did 10 years in prison. He was back after 29 days out and was going to do 5 more. And that blew my mind. And he said to me, he changed my life. He said, why are you looking at me like that? This is your life too. You're an addict. Get used to it. And that night I sat there and I was like, fuck, he's right. Like, look, I'm accumulating all this shit. The only thing I'm accumulating every time is more time every time I'm getting locked up. So the next day I had court, and that's when I went in, and they gave me probation. I made a stipulation that not to contact her. But we still had a case together the next day in Broward. Just so happened it was the next day. So we need to get out before they realized our bond was, we violated it. So I go back to that cell, and the guy says to me, he's going away for 5 years. He goes, so what's going on? I said, I get out today. He goes, congratulations. He goes, you'll be high by 5 o'clock. And I was like, no, I won't be high ever again. And he's like, fuck you, kid. Don't fool yourself. And he's like, you'll be high by 5 today, I promise. And that was March 24th of 2009.
I forgot we had this, like almost the same thing. Yeah.
And I was like, holy shit. When I say that now, I'm like, God damn, it's a while ago. Hey, you can relate to that.
Yeah.
And no, I got out. And then the next day, that night, I went to, this guy was saying.
And that's your clean date?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then that night, this guy was like, it's not a part of my story that I came in and tiled the bathroom and all that, which is I'm no better or worse than anyone else. It's just my story. Yeah. I was one of those guys that rode the car and got the flats, and I rode on the rims, and the rims turned to fucking liquid metal. And I got out and I walked, and then my soles fell out on the feet, and then I crawled as far as I can. And then when I finally collapsed, I ran to every fucking avenue and means and anything I could in life to think I could manipulate it in ways of the weekends, this drug, not that drug, over here, not there, this person I hung with, not me, geographical cures, every fucking thing you can think of. Like I tell my sponsees, whatever you're going to think of 5 years from now, just know I did 10 years ago. It doesn't work. So once I got to that point, I said, okay, now's the time to get clean. And that was March 24th, 2009. And that night, I remember now this guy that was telling me about this certain fellowship, Kevin, in the jail. When I get out, I get my phone back from property. It has a little charge in it. I turn it on, crying, and I reset it to factory settings. I walked out. I went and grabbed my stuff from under the bridge, and that's it.
Which was probably a garbage bag.
Yeah, garbage bag.
And your cat.
Yeah, exactly.
Was the cat still there?
Yeah.
Like when you would get arrested, the cat would be there?
Yeah, just hang out. There's no other way he's going to go.
Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that was it. That was,
So you get clean, and you know, like I said in the beginning, like I can verify the story. You know, I remember being at a meeting and seeing you with a trash bag with nothing. You know, I remember like the look in your eye, like, you know, someone who's just been living on the streets for years. And very quickly, I've seen you become who you are. And you know, I don't know if you know this, but like I've always had like a lot of respect for you because you're very good at like rallying people and getting them excited about recovery. And like I've seen you sponsor so many people and like all the work you've done over the years. And what do you think it was that like got you bought in and sold? Because I see so many people go to meetings and I see so many people like try to get clean, but they don't like jump in and get sold, you know?
passion. A lot of people wade in the shallow end of the fucking pool. When I got to recovery, here's a guy that like, I got to shower probably like every 3 days. I mean, if you just think it's like out of the year, if you only shower every other day, the math is like what? You shower 100 and something times a year.
160 days a
year.
Yeah,
it's like, fuck, dude. And like no one wanted to hug me. No one wanted to talk to me. No one, I weighed like 100 fucking pounds. I looked like the Crypt Keeper. And when I got to recovery and walked in and was just beaten, and the first meeting I hear someone, Sharon, that was from Boston, speaking at the meeting, and I'm like hearing him tell my whole story of like using with his mom and all this other shit. And I'm like, who the fuck planted this guy? Like, yo, this is like some, you know, something's going on here. And the passion of other members I met you, I met George, I met a kid named Jeremy, and you know, like, and all these guys that had this passion, and then I come out that first night, and I remember waiting around and then going back in for another one at 10 o'clock, and I was like, holy shit, like, you know, this is great. And then I go out in the parking lot, and it looks like, you know, a high school fucking recess, you know, like everyone's out there and having fun and talking about what they're going to do and go bowling and all this other shit. And I'm like, damn.
Yeah. And like when I think about it, like honestly, like as much as I love my life today, my first couple years clean, like you can't replace it for all the money in the world. Like it was such a cool time.
Exactly.
Everyone living in halfway houses.
Yeah.
What the fuck are we going to do tonight? This person hooking up with this person, you know, going bowling. And like for drug addicts, like to me, I thought like bowling was fucking so lame. I thought like fucking karaoke was like the fucking lamest thing in the world. But like when a bunch of drug addicts would do it, I don't care what it was. We would just have fun.
Yeah, of course. It was a blast. I mean, I came in with an ankle monitor on, if you remember. And before, the next day when I get to Broward, they said we had 2 cases there. We had one in misdemeanor, one upstairs. My ex, both co-defendant. I go, she gets called first in misdemeanor. The misdemeanor, I think I'm embarrassed like to have it. Oh, big tough guy. I only get fucking felonies. And the misdemeanor was like, pulls out my record and is like, yo, this guy needs a bracelet. And fucking like sentenced me to a bracelet. And then I think I went back like the next week and they gave me the bracelet. And then I go upstairs to the felony court and my co-defendant's not there anymore. And I leave and come to find out, I guess she had pleaded out to the court, which is the wrong thing to do because now you're at the mercy of the judge. And they gave her like 3 or 4 years in prison. And they said to me, give him, you know, let him hang himself. He'll be back soon. And they gave me, I had like a house arrest officer. I had a probation officer. My house arrest just so happened to be born on the same exact day, the same year as I was. Then when I left there, she gave me early termination. There was like a New Year's event for a recovery that we go to. And she called me in because I couldn't go. And she was like, come by the office. And you know, when they call you in, you're fucking sweating to death. You know, like, what did I do? I know I didn't do drugs, but somehow I thought they got in my body. And she cut it. She's like, you're off. And then she called me back and was like, come teach life skill courses. And I'm like, what the fuck? What do you mean life skill courses? She's like, yo, you know them better than most people that went to college. And she's like, can you teach relapse prevention? And I
didn't know this. That's crazy.
Yeah. And I went back and taught relapse prevention for the probation office. And like,
which was basically don't use pussy.
yeah. Don't use pussies. And then it was crazy because we'd be outside. They'd see me all in these sneakers and all rocking this. And then they'd go in and she'd be like, yeah, and today your teacher is Keith. And they'd look at me like, what the fuck? But they could relate.
Yeah.
And then on top, the
Were
craziest.
you always into sneakers?
Yeah. When I was a little boy, I didn't have anything, and
What was your first? Oh, continue.
well, I was a little boy. I didn't have any. My grandmother would save up. I remember I was telling my wife this a couple of weeks ago. She'd saved up. Oh, well, first she took me to the bus stop for school, and I was like, "Gram, we're gonna get in a fight today." And she's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "You just bought these like Skippies. That's what we call them." I was like, "These things, $1.99 make your feet feel fine." And she was like, "No." And we got to the bus stop, and the kids started making fun of me, and I was ready to fight them. And she's like, "All right, let's not go to school today." So she took me to this place called Geller's, downtown Providence. I'll never forget it. They had like all the shell top Adidas and the suede Pumas and the big fat laces. And she got me a pair. And then through not having anything, I always seen the kids that had them. And I was like, man, one day. And then through addiction, I always seen the dope boys having them from my fucking money. And I was like, man, if I ever make it one day, I'm going to be known for my shoes. That's going to be the thing that, yeah. And that was
What was your first nice pair of shoes you bought when you got clean? Like real
Jordan 5 Wolf Grays. And my buddy Anthony Rasso ended up setting me up with this and blew it all up into what it is today. And now he just wears dad Nikes. He doesn't even wear anything.
He doesn't rock.
No, and with those Jordan 5 Wolf Grays are my favorite to this day. I've done, I believe, our engagement photos in them. My wife has them. We did the announcement of my daughter Faith with them.
That's cool.
We did, we all have them. And that was my first big shoe that I liked. So but my passion for recovery was coming in and not having anything and people being like, we're going to eat right now. And that's where the uncomfortability comes in, because here you are when you first try to get into recovery and you don't have anything and everyone starts talking about going to do stuff or going to conventions, and you're like, what the fuck? How am I going to do this? And the thing is that what I learned that day is something called paying it forward. So someone was like, I said, I'm not going to go. I don't have anything today. And they're like, oh no, you're fucking going. Like, I got you. And, this kid named Kyle, he would,
I know Kyle.
Skinny Kyle. He would, I love him to death.
I haven't seen him in 10 years.
He moved. He'd pick me up every day.
Yeah, he's the man.
Bring me out. He would bring me to his house with his family. And here's a guy that was fucking on the streets doing dope for 20 years. I mean, you're bringing me around your family. You're bringing me out to eat wherever he could. And I was like, I'll never forget that. And I've never, if that kid called me right now, I'd be there tomorrow. Well, no matter where he is. And, and he didn't know what he was starting back then. But the thing is that, and then I got to a meeting and a guy named Andre comes and they were doing some spaghetti banquet. And they were selling tickets. And he's like, no, I don't want one, but here, give it to this kid right here. And just gave me
He used to do that all the time. He would buy tickets and just give them
out. And, But see, to me, that was a big impact where I was like, man, these people are hugging me and they're actually calling me the next day and saying, hey, how are you? How you doing? How is everything? And I felt loved, something I never felt, that I searched for.
And I tell people that all the time, going to meetings, the first time I felt love. Not that my parents didn't love me, but I never felt it. If that makes any sense.
Exactly. Yeah. And the love and getting out of my own mind, there was always something going on in recovery. There was always something going on. And, we were going to shoot pool and then I see who is now my wife today there. And I'm like, damn, look at her ass, and then I'm like, yo, will you, but I didn't tell nobody that. In my mind, I was like, damn, she's hot. And then I'm like, yo, I need a partner for pool. And, I started feeling confident about myself. I was like, yo, you want to be my partner in pool? And she's like, yeah. And all I think I wanted to do was to take the tough shot so I could see her leaning over the table, and she knows that now.
Yeah.
I told her, but it was just totally different hanging out with my buddy Max, and he would pick me up all the time and he'd bring me to these fucking rap battles. And I was like, you guys really rap against each other? And then again, if you back it up, all my life I was a breakdancer. So here I am 20-something years later, and they had a breakdancing competition at one of Max's things. And I went in and I won it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
so
and
cool.
I had 3 months clean or 6 months, and I fucking was doing windmills, and I blew out my shoulder, but I didn't let anyone know until afterwards.
Still won.
Yeah, and I walked up to and the other people weren't in recovery. They were. It was at a club, and where we probably shouldn't have been with fucking 3 months or 6 months clean. And I go up to them and I whisper in his ear, I'm like, yo, by the way, I'm 35 years old, and and he was like 20, and we got out of there. I was like, yo, bring me to the hospital. Bring me to the hospital. So I went to the hospital. I remember, hanging around, I think like all these buddies of mine, and they were like right away trying to like write stuff for you. And I was like, no, I don't do anything. Like, I'm allergic to this. If I do this, you're going to be in a bad spot.
Yeah.
And they didn't get it. And then, the plunge is like, this isn't a spectator sport. So when you get into recovery, you're not going to get it by osmosis. It's not sexually contact, like transmitted.
Yeah.
It's, if it was, everybody would have it. Because like at one point, like I would share up there, it'd be like, yo, you slept with her, who slept with him, who slept with her, who slept with her and her and her. Like, and like fucking everybody. It was like, because of course our feelings start to come back when we're clean. For the first time, the first couple months, we're starting getting all these tingly feelings again. And some of our, let's be honest, some of our fucking body parts probably didn't work while we were using.
1000%.
So the thing is that I took the plunge in, like they were talking about steps and what they did and how to do it and everything. And I was like, I'm in. I'm all in. What do I got to do? What do I got to do to feel better?
Yeah, and that's like my whole goal with like everything I do is to like encourage people and excite them about doing the steps, because usually when someone's talking about the steps, it's like some boring older guy talking about it. No young person wants to hear it. No one's talking about the traditions. And like I can't remember the last time I went to a meeting and someone was talking about the traditions, but I remember like when I got clean, like, people like George and all these like, book thumpers or whatever, we're like talking about the traditions. Basic text Jeff was screaming about, working the traditions and throwing chairs and shit,
fighting with noodles.
Yeah.
It was that was so exciting, like to hear like someone share and her jump on a chair and be like, I know why you can't stay clean, because you're a whole. Like I'm like, fuck like yo,
so cool.
I don't ever want to miss an episode of this. I'm going to every fucking meeting they have.
Hell yeah.
It was just like fucking great, dude. And like, it was just,
it was wild back then.
Yeah, it was like as the rooms turn, like it was like a soap opera.
And think about me, I was a 17-year-old kid, coming home every night like, oh, mom, the meeting was so crazy tonight. Da 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 da. Someone threw a chair, and we were rap battling. People would rap battle in the parking lot. People would rap battle in the parking lot.
You don't remember me doing magic tricks?
I think I do.
Yeah, I was really good. My whole life I loved being funny. And I'd have everyone around me, and Abraham's truck would be filled with fucking everybody. It was fucking amazing. I loved it.
We had a blast out there.
It was great. And then you look back, and the sad thing about it in recovery is like Crazy Steve, like some of the things he came up with, the terminology was like incredible. Like he first he told me he fucking invented the Apple cores, and that's everyone hated them because they didn't go away and they weren't disposable. But he told me about a palm tree and the palm tree. And there's two analogies that stick with me today. And one is that for every foot that the palm tree goes up, it's 2 feet in the ground. So if a palm tree is 10 feet, it's 20 feet deep.
Wow.
And they're only in tropical areas. And it's deeply rooted. That's the key word right there, deeply rooted. And if you're deeply rooted, you'll sway like a palm tree in the hurricane. You'll bend. You'll never break. So if I'm deeply rooted in recovery, I'm not going to break. If I'm like my mother-in-law, we used to have an analogy of the penguins. The penguins in whatever they're called, the herd, flock, whatever, they keep the babies in the middle, and they keep rotating the other penguins in this freezing cold weather to be in the center to stay warm. If you're at the center, you're never going to fall off on the edge. And people like just staying on the edge, and that wasn't me. But Steve said to me one day, fucking man, he was great. He says to me, he says, look at that palm tree. You see those 2x4s there? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, what are they there for? And I was like, to support it. And he goes, well, what happens if I place them with twigs? If I replace those 2x4? I said, well, it'll all fall over. He goes, exactly. And that's your recovery. He says, and if you don't have the support around you to hold you up, and you're only hanging around with people with the same clean time, you're going to fall over.
Yeah.
And I fucking stepped back and looked at that. And then I looked at the same parking lot and said, okay, well, he's rapping only to everyone. Literally rapping, not rapping to girls, but he's rapping. And this one's over here fighting with somebody. And I took a step back, and not that I didn't separate from him, but I became hanging out with people like George.
You become hyper aware where you're like, you know what, I want to work out with someone that is in better shape than I am. Exactly. Like I want to go with someone that has things that I don't know about. And like, I know how to fuck girls and get popular and make all the guys laugh. Like I know how to fucking do that. You know, a lot of that is just insecurity, you know.
Exactly.
You know, you want to surround yourself with people that are going to push you harder in your recovery. Steve saved my life, bro. I always say, like, bro, if it wasn't for Steve, bro, he talked to me in the parking lot for hours while I'd be crying. Oh, I don't think I'm an addict. Oh, I hate my dad. My fucking school sucks. I'm so young. Oh, am I never going to drink again? You know, and bro, he would talk to me for hours, bro. And it's crazy how like one person can positively impact so many people.
It is. It's nuts.
He sponsored like half the meeting.
I know. Yeah. And I had Gypsy Mike.
Yeah.
Gypsy Mike was fucking, he had the other half.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and then going through that, having sponsors go out and use while you're still staying there. And what do? You know, I got Addict for Life, you know, but God, it was rough.
So let's talk a little bit about like your entrepreneurship. You know, I've seen you amass so much in what seems like a short period of time. You know, for someone who was homeless for majority of their life, you know, you would imagine from 20 to 35, that's a fucking most chunk of people's life. And like, bro, when I see kids get clean at 20, they're like, oh, that, like complaining. And it's like, bro, people would fucking give their left nut to be 20 years old getting clean right now, you know? And you've accomplished so much. Like, how has that affected you? And like, how do you feel today, like with all the things you've done?
Gifts from my higher power. When you stay clean, like the problems change from, oh God, I can't get to the meeting, or my dad, like you said, or to like, oh fuck, I have a life now, and like life shows up. I married that girl that was at the pool table that night. We have 2 beautiful children. I took an idea of the e-liquid company and the vape company in 2011 and decided to start this where there was like not a lot doing it in the United States.
And why I give you a lot of credit is because you were like one of the people that's, you know, a lot of people catch a wave and like just follow the wave. Like you're someone who created their own wave, where like you were doing phone room stuff that like everyone was doing, you know what I mean? And then like
moving.
Yeah. So like you were able to say like, you know what, I'm going to walk away from something that is actually pretty lucrative and lucrative for a lot of people to do something that is different with a super high risk that you ain't seen no one in the e-liquid business at all. You know what I mean? You kind of created it.
Blame the steps for that. So being in the phone room, sales room, and doing all that and working steps was not practicing honesty in all my affairs. And I was literally clean, living, feel dirty, and literally like contemplating like, I'm a piece of shit. Like, you know, people would move and always get fucked over. But no matter how hard I tried, they'd always get fucked over. And it's easy to fall into that when there's mega money to be made. And I just wasn't right with myself. So in the middle of it, I had a partner, and the last place I had, and we were doing it together. And I started vaping. I went to the mall with Brian, my buddy Brian, TJ, a bunch of others, and there was like 8 of us, and we all bought these cigar-like looking fucking vapes from the kiosk, and out of the 8, like 7 quit smoking. And I was like, holy shit, there's no way this just happened like that easy, because I knew from addiction, people smoking, and my grandmother smoked cigarettes. It was just impossible to do. So I started like getting into it and wanting to, the good addict I am, because people have a misconception of disease of addiction. They think it's drugs. We're drug addicts. We're instant gratification. Feels good, tastes good, smells good. We want abundance as much as we can get. So the symptom is the drugs. The drugs is easy. You know, with the flu, you have a runny nose, a headache, sore throat. The runny nose would be the drug addiction. The whole disease of addiction is instant gratification. And when you channel that into good things and you have your life, like a grip on your life, and you know what you're doing, and you could do it actually really positive stuff that normal people can't obtain. So,
and I have seen a trend where like people who have gotten really involved in recovery have become extremely successful because it takes a lot of discipline and hard work to get the recovery, you know?
Yeah.
We're not talking about clean time, we're talking about recovery, you know?
Yes.
So a lot of people, you know, I've seen that do put money to the side in the beginning. You know, I've seen, you know, people that we both know that have become successful later on in life, but focused on recovery hardcore.
Yeah. It's, Oh, a bunch of things. People worry about the money and save the money. It's nothing to do with the money. It's the context. The context. I took a leap of faith and told my wife, well, I'm making $5,000 a week in the phone room sales, and said, living in Halfway and having all these computers. I'm sure came over when Anthony was living there, and we have all these computers on everyone's nightstand, and we're waking up and all getting to work. And then I tell Ricky, I'm leaving you Halfway. And he's like, no, what do you mean you're leaving? Because everyone was paying their rent. And I was like, well, I got my girl and I need her to be here. He's like, move her in, like the men's Halfway. So here's Sarah sleeping in a twin with me.
Wow.
And like girls would come over and they're only allowed in the common area. And I'm like, all right, it's 10 o'clock. You guys, girls got to leave. And they're like looking at her and she's getting into like, all right, good night, girls, like fucking. So to leave that and the money and go on a leap of faith was, I believed in vaping. I believed that it was a lot. I felt better about myself. I didn't smell like cigarettes anymore. I could breathe again. I work out, dance more without like feeling like I was running out of breath. And I said, there's got to be something better than this. These flavors are good. There's a couple that are doing good, and there was not a lot. There was like 10 companies. And I said, I want to learn how to make it. And I had no idea. It's like saying right now, like, I want to learn how to bake cakes, and you have no idea what goes in a fucking cake at all. And I contacted a lot of people. They, in a roundabout way, told me to fuck off. And then one guy was like, I'll come down and show you. And he was showing me and teaching me online and chat. And I was mixing. I was fucking everything up. Everything tastes like ass. and then I hit a good one. And then I started my marketing. That's my gift, marketing. And I got good at it, and then I started pushing, and then I had a little bit of money. I asked because I was out of work for a while, I was going through interferon for Hep C, so I had gone through all the money where my wife was working. We were living off her check, which is like $500 a week, and I asked two friends, Brian and my old roommates, for $500 a piece. We were going to be three-way partners on Diamond Vapor, and it would be $1,500 to start the company. And they both told me, one said, yeah. He never sent the money. And Brian said, I'm going to buy a pair of Jordan 11 breads. And he didn't do it. And my mother-in-law gave us the $1,500. And I put it and blew it up into what it is today.
Wow.
Yeah.
So just so people know, so Diamond Vapor is your physical store location, but I would imagine that most of your sales are online, right?
We sell to other shops. So
gotcha.
they're
so
calling in.
So you okay. So that's
not just America, everywhere.
All over the
all
world.
over the place. Yeah, I've gotten to go to meetings in the attics at churches in England, and I've gotten to speak in Ukraine in recovery, and I've gotten to go in Moscow and France and all these fucking places that I never knew.
Even imagined.
Yeah, I took my daughter for third birthday to Disney in France and like Euro Disney or something. It was just like fucking out of my mind, out of control.
So how does it feel now, like looking back? Like obviously you've amassed all this success. You were just telling me earlier you have 800 pairs of shoes.
Yeah, over.
That's insane. That's crazy. That's
my
so
wife says
wild.
I should have been a caterpillar so I could wear them all.
Yeah, you should have. That's so crazy. Oh my God. So like, how does it feel like, just like looking back on your life? Like, does it feel like surreal?
Yeah, I'm blessed. It's had a lot of ups and downs. I lost my mother. I lost her 3 years ago to disease.
She saw you clean.
Yeah, she saw me clean. My mom had accumulated 10 years clean.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she
got clean.
She was big in South Florida. Like, there's
Holy
people
cow.
that like, I'll talk to you about it, like that knew her, and they were like freaked out, like, holy shit, Johnny was your mother. And like when they realized now, there were people like that where she had like a treatment center, her and her girl, that it was halfway. No, it was like a halfway. It was like state run. I don't know. And her and her girl had like all these women there.
Wow.
And they used to see me pull up all fucked up, and like some of them are in recovery today. And I'm like, holy shit, we know who you are.
Wow.
And so she was clean, and then when I got clean, she was just starting to use again with her girl, and she was with her girl for like 10 years, and it just spiraled out of control. After I became successful, I said to her, hey, if you want, take the year off. I'll put you in halfway. I'll put you through treatment. I'll give you your phone. I'll pay for every fucking thing. You'll never have to worry about anything. And she, you know how it is, the grip. And she was like, yeah. And she didn't do it. And she had cirrhosis. She had hep turned into cirrhosis. And she ended up dying 3 years ago. And
sorry to hear that.
And 3 weeks or 2 weeks before her, we were in Disney, and we got the call. I had moved her right across the street from my store because, I mean, she was continuously needing me for stuff. And 3 weeks before that had happened, we found her girl dead, overdosed in the apartment.
Oh my God.
So I had to go into hospice and tell my mother that her girlfriend was gone.
Wow.
But, I mean, my mom was crazy. You hear a lot of stories in recovery, and one you don't hear, and I tell this, and people are like, how the fuck? So my mom, so I get a call from the nurse from hospice, and this nurse had an addict as a mom, and she had almost the same story. She just never got high. And she was my age, and cool chick, and she was like, hey, she was even taking care of my mom while I was in Ukraine and Russia. She would come in and take care of her because my mom liked her. She was like real close with her. And she called me and said, hey, you know, it would go where I was the power of attorney, and then when I wasn't there, my mother would sign it over to her girlfriend, and when I got there, she'd sign it over to me. She was playing games. I never even, so she called me and said, hey, your mom, it's time, come on in. So I got there, and my wife came, and Jen came, and Brian, and my little girl, and it was like 4, and she had us in the room, and she was looking off in the corner, talking to my grandmother who had passed, you know. And so she's like telling everyone, take care of me and take care of her granddaughter, and she loves me and stuff like that. And everyone went home, and I stayed with her. And there's a picture you've probably seen with us holding hands, the hands. I sat there with her, and I told her, you know, I love you, and I forgive you for everything, and forgive me for what my part was, because we're not victims, you know. We always play a part and a role in everything that goes on in life. And she said, you know, she was there, and she didn't hear me, and it got late, like 3 a.m, and I left, and I knew in the morning that I would get the call that she had passed. And the next morning I get a call from her girl. And her girl says, I'm taking her out of this hospice. I don't like it. Now, there's like 5 hospices in the state of Florida. My mother was kicked off 4 of them.
Wow.
For abuse of meds. They would drop off to an addict all her meds.
Oh, my God.
Like once a week, they would drop off the meds. And she'd call them like 6 hours later.
They're gone.
Someone stole them. The dog ate them. They were flushed. They were every fucking story.
Oh, my
God.
And
then they brought her in, and her and her girl were sharing them. And so her girl's like, I'm taking her out of here. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, she's not gone. She's not gone? I said, no. I said, I'll be right there. So I get up there. She hadn't eaten in 3 days, and she hadn't taken her meds. And that's how nurses know you're going, because that's what happens to the body. And her girl starts laughing at me. She's like, she faked it to see what your reaction was going to be. Yeah, so that, to go through the process and get that far into it, of accepting it. So when she did die a couple months later, it was like really, like we were at a circus front row down in Miami, and I got the call from the nurses, and I went up, and they said, your mom just passed. And I was like, okay. And I went back down to my seat, and my wife said, do you want to go? And I said, no, well, let's finish the show, and then we'll go. You know, so it's fucked. It was really fucked. But so she got to see me clean. It's been surreal, you know. The issues that I came up with is a lot of going to meetings and people asking me to like fix their vape, and or calling me or walking into my store and saying, hey, I know Keith, can I get a discount? And you're like, Jesus fuck, do you go to Walmart and say, hey, can I get a discount? You know, like you support your friends' businesses. And that's just, and then like people are calling me the new drug dealer, and, you know, serving people nicotine and like fucking all this shit. And you know, and then it is what it is. The circle, the longer you stay clean, the smaller the circle gets, and mine's a period. They're like, you know, I hang with really not a lot of people. I just keep doing the right thing. You know, my mother-in-law always talked about do the right thing and the next right thing will happen. And we've been through it, and then all through like a year, if you go back, you remember like I was looking for my little girl.
Yeah.
I lost my little girl.
So this is the same girl that you were talking about in the beginning of the story.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
zero contact with her throughout the years. Couldn't find her.
I didn't have her last name. I knew they changed it. My ex, her family, someone in her family knew. It's crazy. Someone in her family whose husband has many years clean knew her name. And that's all I wanted. Because now, again, okay, so I told you I went and worked, my house arrest officer, I was doing classes for her. My probation officer, I've been off forever now. He's my boy. We talk to each other all the time. He's actually has said to people, hey, you pissed dirty. Here's your options. I'm going to give you this number to this guy named Keith, and you're going to hang with him for 30 days and do what he does, or I'm going to violate you. You choose. And he does this. Cool. What's fucked up is most of these guys don't do it anyway. And and he'll call me and say, hey, have they talked to you? I'm like, yeah, one time. He's like, all right, I violated him. Yeah. But like he calls me all the time about his problems, or like, it's good. We're good friends. And I hang out with troopers, state trooper now. One of my great friends is a trooper.
You're telling me, it's cool.
It's fucking great. It's like, surround yourself with people who are doing the right thing. So through Joey and Cheryl back then, and he knew people in the DCF and looking for her. We had no last name, none. So, and she didn't have my last name because I wasn't there when it happened. And I think I was even under an alias when I was serving that time when it happened. So I couldn't find her. And we were searching and we heard where she was in Lighthouse Point. My wife had family that she was a nanny for in Lighthouse Point. So she looked through all those yearbooks and searching. Finally, we were like, this ain't going to happen. And my ex had found me again a couple times on Facebook. I continuously blocked her. Now today, I realize like I could have found her a while ago. What happens is December 18th, I get a message. This past December 18th, 2020, I get a message from my ex on Facebook. Because she created like 6 accounts. She would, I guess she wasn't too computer savvy, so if she forgot her password, she would just create a new fucking account. So I couldn't block every one of them. They would continue to come in. So she hit me up and said, hey, I found her. And I'm like, who'd you find? And I was like, she's like, our daughter. I'm talking to her now. And I'm like, get the fuck out of here. My wife's putting my son to bed. So I go up the stairs and I'm like freaking the fuck out. And my wife, being protective of me, was like, yeah, let's relax and let's see what's going on here first. And in her mind, she told me later, like, God help her. She's fucking with him right now. And we went in the other room. I said, give me her name. I'm messaging her. And she's like, relax. I'm talking to her. And I'm like, this fucker. So I'm waiting. And my wife's like, she's had like 6 Facebook accounts. Just click on her page and look at her friends. And she probably has, like, you ever have those people that send you fucking 10 requests in the same name? And you're like, wasn't I their friend already? Yeah. And it's just continuously. So after a while, people stop responding and accepting the request. Yeah. So I looked and I seen a picture and I knew they were calling her Katie. And I clicked on it. And it was a picture of a horse and 2 pictures of a horse. And when I looked in the link of the Facebook, it said Teresa. And I messaged her and I said, hey, I'm looking for a Teresa. And she says, I'm Teresa. And I was like, hey, I'm Keith. And she was like, yeah, you're my dad.
Wow. She was 16?
Yeah, she's 16. Oh my God. I'm getting emotional. I fell to the floor. Literally fell on the floor and fell in my wife's arms crying. And I couldn't stop. It was something I've been searching for my whole recovery. Yeah. Like, never in a million years did I think I'd be able to do this. And
how was her, like, what was your first conversations like? She into shoes?
Yes. Yes. That's so funny. Yeah, and she's into UFC like me, and she's into sports cars. Wow. Yeah, like crazy.
Oh, that's crazy.
Looks like me, and like, so apparently she had been hitting up my ex for like 2-3 years on Facebook.
Wow, trying to get your name?
Messaging my ex, and my ex was never looking at the messages because they go into the other folder.
Yeah, when you don't, like, not friends with someone.
And when she had finally found her, she said she was trying like once a year, and she was searching, and she was watching videos of, she knew she was adopted, and she was watching videos of people that were reunited with their families on YouTube. And she was like getting envious of it. She just wanted to know. And her mom said, don't be surprised if your dad's dead, because he was really bad.
Wow.
And she finally, she responded to her, and she said, do you know who I am? And she even commented on some of her pictures. She was like, hey, contact me, check your messenger. And she wouldn't do it. And she said, do you know who I am? And she goes, yeah, your name's Katie. You used to date my dad. And like, there's my ex telling her this. And she's like, no, I'm your daughter. And she started talking to her. So that I messaged her, and I was like, can I talk to you on the phone? And I got to talk to her that night. She called me. I started this podcast with you. I started I'm from New England, and this is my life.
Wow. And
I told her all about me. And at the end, I said, is there any questions? And she goes, you covered everything. Huh. And I was like, you've been the missing piece of my life. I've craved for you every day. Yeah. And she is a staple in our house. Like, she's every night. Tonight we'll be on video chat. She'll be listening to this soon. She is very, very close with my wife. When I first went on dates with Sarah, I had said, listen, I have a little girl, and if I ever find her, how do you feel about that? She's like, she's going to be my kid. I was like, all right. And yeah, Sarah's like, that's her oldest now. Yeah, she's like big with her. Love, they're really tight. I'm shocked if they're not on right now. Yeah. But, and she was just like into shoes and a straight A student, into horses, loves horses. And I'm blessed. And I got to meet her. I got to right before Chris. This was it. I met her maybe a little bit before December 18th. 23rd, 18th.
I remember it was right before Christmas.
Yeah, and 23rd I went up, and that's the video of me and her seeing each other for the first time. And
that's why it's so important not to leave before the miracle.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and she so on my 12 years, I seen her, and we went up in this Ferris wheel, and on the Ferris wheel she said, will you take the ride on the Ferris wheel with me? And I went up there, and she reached into her pocket, and she had ordered a 12-year medallion. And she said, I just want you to know, were you being clean, this is possible today. And I cried my eyes out again. Yeah.
Imagine if the day you walked in with the trash bag, not knowing anything or anyone, someone said, hey man, in 12 years, you're going to be a multimillionaire on a Ferris wheel, meeting your daughter, and she'd be giving you your coin.
I would have fucking said, what are you smoking? Yeah.
Shit.
Give me some of that.
It's crazy. Yeah, man. And like, that's my whole goal of the podcast, is because like I hear stories online or like videos or whatever. I'm like, bro, I know people in real life that got cooler stories than that. Like there are so many real stories that we know that are like validated, confirmed. Yeah. I saw the whole thing in front of my eyes, that are like true stories that could be movies.
The thing about it is that if you remain humble, like a lot of times with me, I show people like, look, this is where I'm at in life, and people misconstrue that as like, oh, he's bragging or something. Like, no, if my fucking dumbass did it at 35 when I got clean till now, what do you think you could do at 20 years old getting clean? Yeah. And I'm like, I would give you all this if I could just be 20 again. Like, I would walk out of here butt ass naked. I'd want my wife and my kids, but you could have every fucking thing else if I could be 20 again, because I know what I'm going to obtain. Imagine if I at 20 get into the starting, and people just get into their own self, and they don't want to help. They don't want to give back. The biggest like gift to me is like through the years of sponsoring guys that never could get clean and being in treatment centers fucking 12 times, 10 times, and then they hang out with you and realize like, holy shit, this guy's fucking crazy as fuck, but he's clean. He's having this blast doing this and staying clean, and then telling their mom like, yo, you don't need to pay for my halfway because I got a job now, mom. And Thanksgiving, I'm going to be at the Fehrman's house, and and so stuff like that. And the gifts of mothers and family members contacting me or coming to see their kid from another state, and the first thing they get off the plane was like, where's this guy at? And they come and hug me and say, you were there and you were an angel. And I'm not. I'm far from. But I'm the vessel that just is trying to do the work that was so freely given to me. Something that was passed on through my predecessors, I need to continue to pass on. And a lot of us get away from that. And money, property, prestige, and of course it's with myself included, becomes a major factor because that's what we are as human beings. It's about money, property, prestige, money, property, prestige. And we have to step back from that. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. Do I still do the same things I did in recovery? Absolutely. I don't litter. I give my amends to society continues. My amends to my grandmother continues by me staying clean. I'm a big guy about putting the shopping cart back no matter fucking what. If rain, if I park at the end of the park, I've gotten slicker through the years where I park where the carriage return is, so I could just push it right in right there. But some kid was in my car last week, and we're driving away, and I hear like his window open and a fucking bottle. Like I look back and I see a plastic bottle like on this. I'm like, yo, did you just fucking litter? And he's like, yeah. And I U-turned. I was like, get the fuck out and get it. And he was like, what? And I was like, yo, this earth's dirty enough. Like we don't need this stuff. And wow, it's just, for me, I mean, I'm excited to see what the next 10 or 12 years brings. You know, like, and what my wife and I are starting to talk about, all right, what other businesses now that we want to do? What do we want to go about? It's insane, man. It's insane. You know, life is beautiful. And it's not just for me. It could be for anyone. It's the time, the work, the energy. But most importantly, you got to put recovery first. And you got to realize that when you get in here, you can't put on your cape and think, you know, I'm going to go Captain Save-A-Ho. Yeah, Save-A-Ho. Or my wife and I have this pact that like, okay, if one of us uses, we split the house. The using one gets the outside and the one that didn't gets the inside, you know, like, or our friends that are in recovery are the ones that we're going to go to. And we're not going to try to get involved in each other's shit, you know, and the highs of seeing my kid, like my little boy, having a junior, that's like crazy. Just like you. Yeah, having a junior. Like, you know, the Irish, we believe that you die twice. You die when you actually die, and you die when the last person on earth ever mentions your name. So that continues for me. I'm huge into comic books. My whole back's tatted with Spider-Man and Carnage, and see him like obsessed with Spider-Man. I'm like, oh man, that high is just so like amazing. Like the other day I brought them to the fair and they were freaking out, and they have no idea this weekend that we're picking them up early from school on Friday and going to Disney. Nice. You know, so I mean, I live at Disney now. I want to go more than the whole family, truth be told. Like I'm a huge in Disney guy. That's cool. It's incredible. I love it. You know, I couldn't be here tonight doing something like this if it was the way I used to be. I would have robbed your mics.
Yeah, they're expensive. Well, bro, I appreciate you coming out. I know you're super busy, man. The fact that you made time just to do this, you know, like I told you in the beginning, like my goal was to really get people's stories out there that I think are impactful. And like, to be honest with you, in the 13 years I've been clean, you're one of the most impactful person in the program that I know. You know, and I just want to say I appreciate you. Thank you.
No problem. Anytime. Thank you.
This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 888-699-9395 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com.